The sky outside was heavy with rain, soft drops sliding down the glass like little rivers, filling the house with a steady rhythm that felt both calming and lonely. Claire sat at the dining table with her son Daniel. The table was covered with pencils, erasers, and a math workbook open to a page that seemed far too full of numbers for a 10-year-old boy. Daniel leaned over the paper, chewing at his pencil, frustration written all over his small face. "Mom, I don't get it," he muttered, his voice full of defeat. Claire leaned closer, brushing her hand over his shoulder with gentle encouragement. Her voice was calm and steady, the kind that carried patience no matter how many times she explained the same problem. "Don't look at the whole page at once. Just look at this one question. Break it down. Start with the first step, then move to the next." He sighed deeply, but he followed her instructions, tapping the pencil against the paper. For a moment, silence filled the room, except for the sound of rain and pencil scratches. Then, his eyes lit up as he solved the problem correctly. "See?" Claire smiled, nudging him playfully. "You did it." Daniel's frown melted into a grin. "Yeah, but only because you explained it. Dad never explained it like this." The words hung in the air. Claire's heart tightened. She tried not to let the sting show on her face. It had been almost 3 years since the divorce, and still, Daniel sometimes mentioned his father with that quiet mix of disappointment and longing. She hated that her son had to carry those feelings so young. She smiled softly anyway, refusing to let sadness take over the moment. "Well, that's what moms are for. We figure things out together." The boy nodded and bent his head back to the workbook. As she watched him, Claire felt something deep in her chest, love so strong it was almost painful. But behind it, a quiet ache she never spoke about. Nights like these reminded her how much she carried alone. Every responsibility, every fear, every decision, it all fell on her. She wanted Daniel to feel safe, to feel loved, to never sense the emptiness she sometimes felt when the house grew too quiet. Time passed quickly. Problem after problem, they worked side by side. The laughter that bubbled between them when he made a silly mistake lightened the room. By the time they closed the workbook, the rain had softened, and the night was fully settled around them. "Homework is done," Daniel said proudly, stretching his arms like he had just finished something enormous. Claire chuckled and ruffled his hair. "That's my boy. You worked hard." After cleaning up the table, she followed him into his room. The small space was warm, filled with posters of superheroes and stacks of books. She tucked him under the covers, smoothing the blanket and leaning down to kiss his forehead. "Good night, sweetheart. I'm proud of you." Daniel's eyes, bright even in the dim light, looked at her with an unusual seriousness. He hesitated, as though debating whether to speak. Finally, his small voice broke the silence. "Mom, I wish you weren't always alone." Her breath caught. For a moment, she couldn't respond. She forced herself to smile, brushing his cheek lightly. "Don't worry about me, Daniel. You just be a kid. That's your job." T didn't look convinced. He closed his eyes slowly, still holding that look of concern that seemed far too grown up for his age. Within minutes, his breathing evened out, and he was asleep. Claire sat there for a moment longer, watching him, before quietly standing and leaving the room. She closed the door halfway, her heart heavy. She walked back to the quiet kitchen, the house dim with only a lamp casting a soft glow. She leaned against the counter, staring at the rain sliding down the window pane. Her son's words echoed in her mind. "I wish you weren't always alone." It was true. She was lonely, though she rarely admitted it, not even to herself. Since the divorce, she had told herself she didn't need anyone, that her life was about raising Daniel, about giving him a safe and happy home. She told herself she was strong enough, and most days she believed it. But on nights like this, when the house was quiet and the weight of responsibility sat heavy on her shoulders, she felt the emptiness. Her heart longed for something she couldn't quite put into words. Not just companionship, but warmth. Not just someone in the house, but someone who saw her, who understood her, who would sit across the table and share the silence without it feeling heavy. She turned off the lamp and slowly made her way upstairs. The house creaked softly under her steps, the familiar sound of solitude. She paused at Daniel's door, listening to his soft breathing. That little boy was her world, her strength. The reason she kept moving forward. But tonight, his innocent words had opened a part of her heart she usually kept closed. She pulled her blanket over herself in bed, staring at the ceiling. Rain whispered against the roof, lulling the house into sleep. But she stayed awake for a long time, somewhere in her heart. She felt a stirring she hadn't felt in years, a longing. She had almost forgotten, and she didn't know that Daniel had already seen what she tried to hide. He loved her too much not to notice. He had plans of his own, quiet plans that only a child could dream up. Plans that might change her life in ways she could never imagine. The next morning came quietly. The storm had passed, leaving the streets damp and shining under the sunlight. Claire rushed through her usual routine, packing Daniel's lunch, reminding him to grab his homework folder, tying his shoelaces when he struggled. These small moments always reminded her that no matter how heavy life felt, she had purpose. Daniel's smile gave her strength to face each day. By afternoon, she was at the library where she worked. The smell of old books filled the air as she shelved them carefully, greeting familiar faces with polite warmth. She had built her life on routines: work, home, dinner, homework, bedtime. It kept her steady, even when loneliness sometimes tugged at her heart. When she returned home that evening, the house was already alive with the sound of Daniel's pencil scratching across paper. He sat at the dining table again, a notebook spread open, his brow furrowed in concentration. Working hard already. Claire asked with a smile, setting down her bag. Daniel looked up, his eyes bright. "Yeah, we got an assignment in English today. The teacher said to write about family, about who makes us feel safe and loved." Claire's heart warmed at the thought. That sounds like a beautiful topic. So, what did you write? Daniel hesitated, chewing his lip. For a moment, she thought he might not show her. But then he pushed the notebook toward her, his small fingers pressing the edge nervously. "Here, I want you to read it." She sat down, curiosity tugging at her. Her eyes moved over the messy but careful handwriting. "My mom is the strongest person I know. She works hard every day and helps me with everything. She makes me laugh when I'm sad, and she teaches me when I don't understand. But sometimes I think she is lonely. I see it when she sits by herself after I go to bed. I wish she had someone to smile with, someone to sit with her when I'm not there." Claire stopped reading. Her throat tightened, her eyes blurred with tears she tried to hold back. She blinked rapidly, but the words wouldn't leave her mind. She looked up slowly, meeting Daniel's worried gaze. "Sweetheart," she whispered, her voice shaking, "why did you write this?" Daniel shrugged, his expression older than his years. "Because it's true. You're always here for me, Mom. You make everything okay for me. But I don't want you to always be alone. You deserve someone too." Claire pressed a hand to her mouth, overwhelmed. She had never spoken about her loneliness out loud, never admitted it even to herself. But her son, her little boy, had noticed what she tried so hard to hide. "You shouldn't worry about me," she said softly, reaching across the table to hold his hand. "You're just a kid. That's not your job." Daniel shook his head firmly. "But I do worry, because I love you, and maybe you should let someone love you too." Her breath hitched. His words were so innocent, yet they struck deep, carrying the weight of truth she hadn't been ready to face. She wanted to smile, to brush it off. But she couldn't. He had seen her, really seen her, in a way no one else had. The silence between them stretched, filled only by the ticking of the clock and the soft rustle of papers. Claire finally forced herself to smile, though tears still clung to her lashes. "Thank you, Daniel. That was beautiful, and it means more than you know. But I promise I'm okay." Daniel studied her face for a moment, as if deciding whether to believe her. Then he nodded slowly, though she could tell he wasn't fully convinced. Before she could say more, a sound broke the moment. 3 soft knocks echoed at the front door. Claire froze. Evening visitors were rare. Her heart gave a quick jolt of surprise. Daniel looked up, curious. Who could that be?" he asked. She wiped quickly at her eyes, not wanting whoever it was to see she had been crying. She stood, smoothing her sweater, trying to steady herself. The knocking came again, gentle but insistent. With a deep breath, Claire walked toward the door, her footsteps echoing lightly against the wooden floor. She hesitated, her hand hovering over the doorknob, her heart beating faster than it should have for something so simple. Finally, she opened it. On the other side stood Michael, her neighbor from next door. He was holding a small stack of envelopes in his hand. His expression warm, but slightly hesitant. His dark coat was damp from the earlier rain, and his kind eyes met hers the moment the door swung open. "Evening, Claire," he said softly. "Sorry to bother you, but it looks like your mail got mixed with mine again." She blinked, caught off guard. "Oh, thank you. That happens sometimes." She took the letters from his hand, her fingers brushing his for just a second longer than expected. Michael smiled, not moving right away. "No problem. I didn't want you to miss anything important." From behind her, Daniel called out, "Who is it, Mom?" Michael leaned slightly to the side, smiling when he saw the boy at the table. "Homework night again?" he asked warmly. Daniel grinned, proud. "Yeah, Mom helps me. She's the best at explaining stuff." Michael's eyes softened as he looked back at Claire. There was something unspoken in the way his gaze lingered, a quiet recognition, a kindness she hadn't felt from anyone in a long time, for reasons she didn't understand. Her heart skipped a beat, and at that very moment, Claire realized her son's words from earlier maybe. "You should let someone love you" were not going to leave her mind anytime soon. She forced a polite smile. "Well, thank you again for bringing these." Michael nodded, but instead of stepping back, he stayed just a moment longer, as though he wanted to say something else. The pause stretched between them, filled with possibilities she hadn't considered before. Then Daniel's voice came again, cheerful and innocent. "Mom, maybe he can stay for tea." Claire's eyes widened slightly, her heart pounding. She turned toward Michael, unsure of what to say. And for the first time in years, she wondered if this knock at her door was more than just a coincidence. Claire hesitated at the door, her fingers tightening on the envelopes Michael had just handed her. She hadn't expected company tonight, much less the neighbor who always seemed polite but distant, the man she had only shared brief waves and quiet greetings with since he moved in 6 months ago. Michael stood there with that easy smile, not pushing, not rushing. Something in his eyes made her feel seen, though she didn't want to admit it. Before she could think of an excuse, Daniel's voice cut through the silence again. "Mom, invite him in. We've got tea. Right, Mom?" Claire turned, caught off guard by her son's enthusiasm. "Daniel, it's late. I'm sure Mr. Parker has things to do." But Michael chuckled softly. "It's just Michael. And honestly, I don't mind tea if the invitation is real." Her cheeks warmed. For years she had closed the door politely on the world outside, too careful to let anyone step too close. And now with just one knock, she felt her guard beginning to falter. She moved aside, her voice gentle. "Then, come in. Just for a little while." Michael stepped inside, shaking off his coat. His presence seemed to fill the room in a way Claire wasn't prepared for. He smelled faintly of rain and wood smoke, and when he smiled at Daniel, Boy's face lit up as if he had been waiting for this all along. The three of them settled at the table. Claire poured steaming cups of tea, her hand slightly unsteady as she placed one in front of him. Daniel, buzzing with energy, started talking about his school project, his favorite books, and even the superhero drawing he had been working on. Michael listened intently, nodding, asking questions that made Daniel beam with pride. "So, you're the artist in the house, huh?" "That's impressive," he said, glancing at Claire with a quiet admiration. As though he already knew where Daniel's confidence came from, she found herself smiling more than she expected. Usually evenings felt long and heavy, but with Michael sitting there, time seemed to move differently. The silence between words wasn't uncomfortable, was warm, its almost natural dot, when Daniel excused himself to brush his teeth before bed. The house grew quieter, leaving only the two of them at the table. Claire sipped her tea, unsure how to fill the space. Michael was the first to speak. I hope I didn't intrude. It's just, well, it's nice to have company sometimes. His words struck her because they mirrored her own thoughts. She looked down at her cup, her voice soft. It is nice. I just don't usually let people in. Michael studied her carefully, his tone gentle. I get that. After my wife passed, I kept to myself a lot too. It's easier sometimes, isn't it? Not letting anyone close. Claire's head lifted sharply. His confession was unexpected, raw. She saw something in his eyes, grief, quiet strength, the kind of loneliness she carried too. Her chest tightened with empathy. I'm sorry, she whispered, meaning it deeply. He gave a small nod. His smile faint but sincere. Life has its ways of breaking us down, but it also surprises us, sometimes in the simplest moments. Their eyes met across the table, and for a long second, neither of them looked away. Claire's heart beat faster, not out of fear, but out of something she hadn't felt in years. Before she could respond, Daniel reappeared, rubbing his eyes, his blanket clutched in one hand. Good night, Mom. Good night, Michael. Michael smiled warmly at him. Good night, champ. Sleep well. Daniel looked at his mom one last time, his expression thoughtful, almost knowing. Then he disappeared into his room, leaving the door half open. The silence returned. Heavier now, but charged with something new. Claire stood slowly, carrying her empty cup to the sink, trying to steady her breathing. Michael joined her, setting his cup down gently. Daniel's a great kid, he said softly, his voice low enough that it felt like it was meant only for her. She turned to him, her eyes bright with quiet pride. He's everything to me, my whole world. Michael nodded, then hesitated. His gaze lingered on her face, soft but intense. It shows. The way he looks at you, the way he talks about you, you've given him everything. But I can't help but think, maybe someone should give you something too. Claire's breath caught. His words, though simple, pierced straight through the walls she had built around herself. For a moment she couldn't move, couldn't speak. She finally found her voice, though it trembled. You don't know me, Michael. Small smile curved his lips. Maybe not yet. But sometimes you don't need years to see when someone's heart deserves more than loneliness. Her chest tightened again, emotions swirling too fast to name. Part of her wanted to retreat, to protect herself from disappointment. But another part, a deeper part, longed to believe him. Michael stepped back slightly, sensing her unease, his tone respectful. I should let you rest. It's late. She nodded, though a quiet part of her wished he would stay longer. He moved toward the door, pulling on his coat. At the threshold, he paused, turning back to her. Thank you for the tea, he said. Then, after a beat, his voice softened even more. And for the company. Claire managed a small smile. Thank you for bringing the mail. He chuckled, then slipped out into the cool night air. The door closed gently behind him, leaving Claire leaning against it, her heart racing faster than it had in years. The house was silent again, but it didn't feel quite as empty. His presence lingered in the air, in the way her son had smiled, in the way her own heart now stirred with something she hadn't let herself feel. She pressed a hand to her chest, whispering to herself, What are you doing, Claire? Upstairs, Daniel shifted in his bed, a faint smile on his face as if he already knew something she hadn't yet admitted. That evening, she realized the knock at her door had not been ordinary. It felt like the beginning of something fragile and unexpected, something that might just change everything. The night felt different after Michael left. The rain had stopped, leaving the air cool and still. And Claire stood by the door longer than she meant to, her hand resting on the wood as though she could hold on to the warmth of the moment. She hadn't expected to feel so alive after something as simple as tea and conversation. But her heart hadn't stopped racing since he'd smiled at her. She turned off the lights downstairs and made her way upstairs. Her thoughts heavy, but not the same kind of heavy she had carried for years. This weight was new, lighter, almost hopeful, yet frightening. She slipped into her room, pulled the blanket over herself, but sleep didn't come. Her mind replayed every detail, the kindness in Michael's voice, the way he had looked at her, the way Daniel had seemed so at ease with him, as if he had been waiting for this very moment. The next morning, she tried to shake it off, convincing herself it had been nothing more than polite, neighborly kindness. But her heart refused to agree. Days passed. Each time she stepped outside, she noticed Michael more tending his yard, carrying groceries, walking to his truck. Their eyes met more often now, and each time there was a quiet recognition. A silent exchange of something unspoken. One evening, a week later, another knock came at her door. Claire hesitated, her heart thudding just like before. When she opened it, Michael was there again, holding a small dish. "I made too much stew," he said simply. "Thought you and Daniel might like some." Her lips parted in surprise. "That's thoughtful of you. Thank you." Daniel, hearing the exchange, rushed to the door, his eyes lighting up. "Hi, Michael. Are you staying for dinner?" Michael laughed, scratching the back of his neck. "Only if your mom doesn't mind." Claire's pulse quickened. She hadn't had another adult sit at her table in years. But Daniel's hopeful eyes made it impossible to refuse. She stepped aside. "Come in." Dinner was simple bread, stew, and soft laughter that filled corners of the house long quiet. Daniel chattered endlessly, asking Michael about his work, his favorite sports, even his favorite ice cream flavor. And through it all, Claire found herself relaxing, laughing, enjoying the warmth of having someone there. When Daniel excused himself after dessert, leaving them alone once more, the atmosphere shifted. Claire sat across from Michael, her hands clasped together, unsure how to bridge the silence. Michael leaned forward slightly, his tone gentle. "Claire, I don't want to make you uncomfortable, but I'd like to say something." Her breath caught. "What is it?" He hesitated, searching her eyes. "I've noticed the way you carry everything on your own. You're strong, but I can see the weight of it. And I want you to know you don't always have to be alone." Her throat tightened, the words almost too much. "I've told myself for years that I don't need anyone, that it's better this way. Safer for my aunt, for Daniel." Michael's voice softened even more. "Sometimes safer isn't happier. Sometimes letting someone in is the only way to find peace again." Their eyes locked, and for a moment, she couldn't breathe. She wanted to believe him, wanted to trust the warmth in his voice, but fear still tugged at her. The last time she opened her heart, it had broken her. Could she risk it again? Michael didn't push. He leaned back slightly, giving her space. "I'm not asking for anything tonight. I just want you to know, if you ever let me, I'd like to be here for both of you." Her chest ached with the honesty in his words. She wanted to cry, to smile, to say yes all at once, but instead she whispered, "Thank you." The clock ticked softly, filling the silence between them. Finally, Michael stood, slipping his coat back on. At the door, he paused, his expression tender. "Maybe next time, instead of stew, we could do dinner properly. Out somewhere, just the two of us." Her lips curved into the smallest smile, a spark of something new lighting inside her. "I'd like that." Kay smiled back, warm and steady. "Good night, Claire." When the door closed behind him, Claire leaned against it, her heart pounding so hard she pressed a hand to her chest to steady it. For the first time in years, the loneliness inside her didn't feel endless. Something had shifted. She turned to head upstairs when she saw Daniel standing in the hallway. Half asleep, clutching his blanket, his eyes, though heavy with drowsiness, held a quiet knowing. "Mom," he whispered softly, "see? I told you. Maybe you just needed to let someone love you." Claire's breath broke into a laugh and a tear at the same time. She knelt down, pulling him close, pressing her cheek against his hair. "Oh, sweetheart, you're wiser than I'll ever be." He hugged her tightly, then shuffled back to his room, leaving her alone in the hallway with her heart wide open in a way it hadn't been in so long. That night, as she slipped into bed, she realized something profound. Her son hadn't just written an essay for school, he had seen the truth she was too afraid to admit. His innocent words had opened a door she thought was locked forever. Love had knocked on her door quietly, unexpectedly. Through a neighbor carrying misdelivered mail and a boy who wanted his mother to smile again. And for the first time in years, Claire dared to imagine a future not just filled with duty and survival, but with hope, warmth, and maybe, if she let it grow, love.